metaphysical teaching, because belief, as Jesus demonstrated, is at the bottom of every demonstration we make. Nobody's going to get very far without belief in the thing we do. Well, my subject this morning is potentialities, I should say. And you know, we advertise every week in the New York Times, in the religious columns, and some of you look it up and see whether I'm still speaking here and what the topic is and so on. And of course I do too on Saturdays. And yesterday I was very much surprised because I look at the other people in the metaphysical movement and what they're talking about and who's talking and so on. And of course Dr. Bach was speaking. And I was very interested that another great mind is talking on the same topic. He says the potentials in living. And that's about as close as you get to the subject I've embraced this morning. Potentialities. Well, you know, as you look about the world, there's a great potential in everything we see. For example, take uranium. The savage, the Indians that lived here in the early days, people anywhere, had little idea of the potentiality of uranium. Well, we've seen the great potential it has when you harness it in certain ways. And Einstein found the key, mathematically, how to release its energy. But that energy was there from the beginning of time, if there was a beginning. Great potential. And no matter what you look at, there's a great potential in it. We have to discover how to use it sometimes, and we've seen a lot of that recently. But the greatest of all potentials is in the human mind, because we are the by means of the way God operates on this plane. Uranium would be in the ground forever if man didn't discover it and learn how to use it. And it's true of everything else. But the potential that we possess in this great computer of ours, and Jesus had such a wonderful way of saying, when he said, "Isn't it written in your law, I said ye are gods?" That's going right to the top, isn't it? And sometimes in meditation, I say, I am God's mind where I find myself. Because there's only one mentality in the world, God's mentality. And it's filtered through our consciousness, yet it's God's mind. And as we recognize and motivate ourselves and get the inspiration to do something, the idea, the potential is going to stay right where it is. This great computer, nothing much is going to happen. We see it in all kinds of things. I was reading yesterday in the New York Times about doctors now being able to save premature born babies that have only been in the mother's womb about 2.5 months. And before, it was almost a certainty. They either died at birth or didn't last very long. But these doctors have used their potential to save these individuals. They've found ways of making them completely normal human beings in the end. A great idea. Another man thinks about something new in a building. The man who was motivated to build this General Motors building that I use an example all the time. He had to have an idea. Turned out a beautiful idea. motivated to make something grand and beautiful right here in New York City. He used his potential, and he said that in the beginning he was so flabbergasted of doing anything like that. But when he got in touch with God, he got the idea. The potential that he had began to work out. Well, Jesus was saying that in a way to his hearers at that early day. He said, I've demonstrated to you the things that the human mind can do. For which of these good things do you stone me? But they, comprehending so little, even as some of his own disciples did, his apostles, they didn't understand that he was saying that they had the same potential as he had. All through his teaching, he didn't say, I'm different in kind. Do you stone me because I say I'm the Son of God? We're all sons of God. A lot of the world hasn't wakened up to it yet. That's the only difference. They look at it so religiously instead of spiritually that they don't quite comprehend that if Jesus is different from us, different in kind, then there's not much hope for us. Because Jesus could do anything if he were different, if he was something so special, so godlike that you couldn't attain to it, then what hope is there for us? We're shooting at the wrong target. But if you tell me that I'm a little fellow down here and Jesus up here, the elder statesman, if you like to say that, and that I can attain to the things he did, even if it takes several lifetimes, and I believe he was had several lifetimes before him. He very much believed in reincarnation. He didn't preach it because he didn't want to get people into postponing things like the Hindus were doing, people in India, and saying, oh, we don't have to do it in this incarnation, we'll do it in the next. And postponement, robs you of all the good you could have. So the idea is not to postpone, it's to solve problems. And Jesus was telling them that they all had that same potential. When he said, isn't it not written in your law? I said, ye are gods. So the idea was there. And he was doing this for posterity as well as those days, as everything he did. He was a very far-seeing prophet. And he realized the Christ more than anybody up to date. We talk about these things. We say, yes, the Christ is in me. I am a son of God, a child of God. But do you believe it? And it brings us back to this song that we had this morning. Do you believe it? Because if you don't believe something, it won't do anything for you. You've lost the motivation. So Jesus was trying to tell you, me, and everybody, there's a great potential. Now you say, I look around the world and I see so much sickness and all kinds of negative things. Well, do you believe that God made a sick universe? It is a universe, and not a chaos. He didn't make a sick universe. We make it sick. That's a hard pill to swallow. That through our wrong thinking and taking the wrong choice, that we bring these things upon ourselves. But always the idea is that we have the potential to do the good thing. The Bible says, let the weak say I'm strong. Are they talking about a lie to yourself? No, they're saying the potential is there. Let the weak say I am strong. And it's true. Sometime if you feel very weak about doing something, stop a moment. Realize that you are a son of God. And then remind yourself, let the weak say I'm strong. And you have good reason for it, because the whole universe is in consonance with that idea. Because you are the by means of. And God wants you to be a success. God didn't create failures. He created people that had the potential to be great successes, and many of them have been. The poet Wordsworth says, "We come from God our home, trailing clouds of beauty and splendor." The poets see it sometimes more clearly than the average man. We come from God, who is our home. Where else is there? You say, "Well, I was born in Flatbush or Squeedunk or something else." Yes, that's where you started your incarnation on this plane. But if it weren't for God, you'd never get here. Because you can go back and back and back and back. And you are the sum total of everybody that's been on this plane. So you have a great heritage. And as you look back in perspective, you see all the great things that have been done by all kinds of people. This world is getting better and better every week, every month, every year, because great minds have made it better. In the beginning of the Bible, the very first things we're told, all this is made for you. Go out and subdue it. Not destroy it. Subdue it for your use. For the use of mankind. To make an even better world tomorrow. And it's happening all the time. Oh yes, we see negative things, gas shortage and so on. And I think a lot of that is not what it's cracked up to be. But suppose there's a gas shortage. That's man's fault. Not God's fault. The oil and everything has been in there for thousands of years. Millions, probably. And unless we learn how to use anything, we're going to destroy it. It doesn't matter whether it's gasoline or nuclear power or waterfalls or anything else. If we don't use things rightly, we're going to run out of them. So we're learning all the time. Usually we start with a negative first, and then after a while we see our mistakes, and we learn just how much better we can do the thing. I remember talking about gasoline about 30 years ago, let's say, or maybe 35 or something like that. They were saying there was only enough oil in the ground in the United States to last about 12 years. And we have more oil now, not just in the United States, but all over the world, than we ever dreamed of. But I sympathize with the Shah in Persia. He was a far-seeing man. He made mistakes. We all do. But if you don't make a mistake, you don't make anything else either. Remember last Sunday, I told you about the talents. If you bury your talent in the ground so that the master comes back and finds it, and you're afraid you might lose it, well, you haven't gained anything. You've not done a thing. But if you invest it, the people in the Bible did, in the story, and you gain equally 100%, that's a pretty good interest rate, isn't it, on the money? Jesus knew what he was talking about. Then you're able to use your potential and make something great. And you remember Jesus, I'm going to get back to the Shah, I haven't forgotten about him. But you remember that Jesus said, to him that hath shall be given, and to him that hath not, the little he hath shall be taken from him. What you don't use wilts away. And when you use a thing, it multiplies and grows beautiful and more splendid all the time. Getting back to the Shah, he had things in consciousness for his nation. He was trying to bring them out of the doldrums, out of the past, the religious kind of thing. Now, I think religion is necessary in the world, but I don't think they ought to mix religion and politics, as they're doing in Iran at the present time. They do it in many other places, but what they're doing in Iran is uncalled for in every kind of way. But the Shah was looking forward, and he was trying to bring his nation, and he did a lot for them. He certainly did something for the women. He got rid of their veils. And this holy terror they have now, he's bringing them back again. That's a step in the past, in the back. Does it make a woman more holy to cover her face? Even if you want to believe that stupid thing, that doesn't do anything for a woman. Let the light of God shine forth, the beautiful expression on women's faces. That's what the Shah was doing. But maybe he worked too fast. But one thing I agree with him, and that is on the oil situation. He said, oil is such a wonderful thing. It's a shame to use it in cars and trucks and motorcycles and the rest of the thing, because it has the potential. Out of oil, they make such wonderful medicines and paints and everything else that we can use. Precious things that would be hard to duplicate again. So he had a wonderful idea. He tried to conserve oil as much as he could, but the pressure of oil needs, because they haven't discovered something else. Well, there it was. And I'm saying some of this morning because there's a potential in everything. I don't know what the answer is to the oil situation. I think, as I said last Sunday, that we'll get a beautiful, bright idea to extract electricity out of the air. It's there. We see it in thunderstorms when we have electric bolts coming down the sky, destructive things sometimes. But we haven't yet learned how to do it. That's the only reason it's a mystery. But that's always been the case. It's always been mysteries until we learn how to do it. I want to tell you about motivation, a story. I don't know how true this is, but it's a story. There was a man had to work late every night to midnight, as they do in some plants. And he lived in a small town, and he had to go by a cemetery. And there was a path through this cemetery that, if it were moonlight, you could see your way, but when there wasn't moonlight, it was pretty dark. And one night, he had to go, he thought he'd go through the cemetery because it was moonlight, and he could get home maybe 5-10 minutes sooner. And he walked through this path, and for several nights, the moon was out, and he could see his way clearly, and he got so used to this, he said, oh, I could do this in the dark, you know, like in walking your own home. Well, the moon waned. Got cloudy one night, but he said, oh, I know how to go. I'm going through this. Saves me a lot of time. But one thing he didn't take into consideration, that there are always new graves being dug. And as he walked along, he walked into one of these graves and slid down to the bottom. And he got down to the bottom, and of course it was a deep thing. The first one was kind of deep, and he scratched away, and all he did was break his fingernails and pull down more dirt on top of him. Well, it was after midnight, and he was sensible. He wasn't afraid of the tombstones or anything. But he sat down, put his coat around him, said, well, the light will be here soon, and somebody will come, the grave diggers or somebody else, and I'll get out of this. And then another man came along a little while later, and he didn't see this grave, and he slid down to it on the other end. Now it was pretty dark, and they couldn't see each other. Foggy, too, as it often is in cemeteries. And this man was digging away, trying to get out of this grave. And when the first man said to him, man, you'll never make it. With that, the man had made it like a shot. He was motivated. And he got out quick, and I suppose he helped the other fellow out after that. Well, that's a story, of course. It's a cute story. But there was motivation. You see, if you have an idea, you need motivation, you need inspiration, you need intuition. You need all these things. You need preparation. Now, you can do anything in the world that you're prepared for, that you have the ability for. You can't go out and be a prima donna and sing in the opera unless you've prepared yourself for it. But if you've prepared yourself and you have the voice, then it's only a question of time. You have the potential. And you have to have the motivation, the desire. Take another case of a man that just walked across the country. It took 2 months to do it. He was on the TV the other morning. Not the TV, the radio. And he got across, in, as I say, in 2 months. And he had a support crew because he couldn't run day and night. And they asked him in the end what was the most important thing he needed for that running across the country. He ran about 50 miles a day. And they asked him, did he have to go on a special diet? He said, no. I ate a lot of sugar. Not raw sugar, but sweet things, because he needed the energy, and that's fine if you're running, you need energy. But he said, I didn't think much about the diet. I just ate more than I would any other time. And they said, well, what's the most important thing? He said, desire, motivation. He had 2 other people to start out with him, and after 2 weeks, they both left him. Because they didn't have the desire. He had this terrific desire, the motivation, to want to be the first one that ran across the United States, and he did it. Now, I don't say that's a great thing to do. For most people, it'd be a waste of time. It's nicer to go on a bus or a train or a car or something. But the important ingredient there is that motivation, desire to do the thing. And if you don't have a desire, a motivation for it, for anything you do, and then a belief in it, you're not going to get very